let's move that a little bit and let's talk about, okay, let's talk about embracing risk, Jonathan, yeah? And let's talk about taking it, so from good, sensible, all the things we should do, and some really practical stuff, let's move that around a little bit and talk about embracing risk.
Okay, thank you, Mel. Yeah, just going to share the slides at this end. Great, so yes, so I'm going to argue that for trustees to fully fulfill their responsibilities as trustees, they must embrace risk. Yet at the same time, as Mel's already alluded to, the majority of trustee boards are instinctively risk averse. But I think for the social purpose sector to deliver greater social impact, which surely is what we're all there to do, we need to tackle this dilemma of embracing risk while being risk averse at the same time. So why do I say that trustees need to embrace risk? Well, the overriding responsibility of a trustee is to act in the best interest of the charity's beneficiaries and to deliver social impact, public benefit, call it what you like. And likewise, in the social enterprise sector, the board should be focused on maximising that social impact. Yet, in trying to achieve that, boards are faced with multiple different options, competing priorities, etc. Some of those options are easier than others, and there can be a tendency to take the easy route, to stick with those easier options, take the course of least resistance. And you can do that still confident that you can be delivering social impact. But will the easy, less risky option result in maximising social benefit? If we took a more challenging route with associated greater risk, possibly in terms of uncertainty of those outcomes, possibly in terms of financial risk, if we were braver and bolder, could we deliver more? And I clearly going to argue, yes, potentially, yes, I think we could. But if and only if we understand the risks we are taking and have the necessary underlying processes, some of which Gemma's covered already, in place to manage those risks as effectively as we can. So we can go out there and embrace risk, but we need the basics in place to be able to do that properly. And therein, for me, lies the rub, because risk management is, for too many, seen as a very constraining concept. As soon as risk management, the phrase risk management is used, people think it's about stopping things from going wrong. It's all about the negative. Whereas it should be seen as something that's there to create the necessary conditions for things to go right, and for an organisation to take smart, well-managed risks that will allow it to increase social impact. So actually, I think we can turn this whole risk management language round to think about the positive. If you think about your average risk register, does that give you any sense of liberation and optimism and willingness to embrace risk? No, probably not. It's more of a worry list of everything that can go wrong. And that's not risk management. So people get to the risk register and think, we've got a risk register, therefore we're managing risk. And I think that there's a lot more to it than that. And the risk management is actually the process under which options can be assessed in light of an understanding of risk and the necessary trade-offs that result. And it requires analysis, and it requires that deep understanding, I suppose, of those individual risks, but it's also about open and frank discussions based on reliable underlying information. And in my experience, it's those discussions which best demonstrate risk management, not the paper trail. But let's also consider the other sweeping statement that I made at the outset, that trustee boards are inherently risk averse. And again, I'll keep talking while the slide catches up. So how can I justify that trustee boards are inherently risk averse? Well, the trustee role is a hugely challenging one, and the expectation placed on trustees, there we go, the expectations placed on trustees are only getting greater. We think of the safeguarding environment, for example. Yet the concept of voluntary trusteeship in the charity sector, that goes to the heart of what a charity is all about. It's the heart of the essence of charity. And while there are calls for more paid trustees in certain quarters, the vast majority of trustee boards remain 100% non-execs. Now, from a risk perspective, for all charities over the threshold of needing to employ staff, the implication of a 100% non-exec board is that you've got a board which is one step removed from the actual business of running the charity and managing the charity's risks. So as a consequence, trustees have to set up delegated authorities as to what the executive team is delegated to do. But ultimately, they have to place their confidence in the executive team to manage those risks effectively on their behalf. And it's that delegation and that sense of not being fully in control that, in my view, leads many boards to be too risk averse. So how can we tackle that? For me, we move on another slide. There we go. This is all about risk appetite. And what I mean by risk appetite is the one bit of risk management jargon that I do use, because I can't find a better way of describing it. But it's setting out where an organisation is and is not prepared to take risks. But it can be a very positive statement, and I think more open discussions are needed to develop a shared understanding of risk appetite within any organisation. And for me, it's the only way that you get that delegated authority to work, because without it, the executive might mistakenly discard options that they consider would be too risky for the board to contemplate, whereas the board might have a different view. Or they might make other bad judgment calls in areas that maybe should have been escalated to the board to decide, but the management decided to took the decision themselves. And as an example of this, and a positive example of where this can work, or where I've seen this work, so a client, a charity that I've been working with, helping them support their risk management processes, embracing some of this thinking. One of the key risks that they were faced was the income diversification risk. They had some 70% of their income came from one single institution. They wanted to maintain that level of income from that institution where it was, but they wanted that to be a lower proportion of their total income. So when they were approached by a commercial company interested in developing a commercial partnership with them, a corporate partnership, they were naturally very interested as seeing a route to putting their income diversification strategy into action. It was only then in doing due diligence on that company that they realized that some of the individuals associated with that company had a track record of actions and saying things that went in direct conflict with what the charity stood for. And therefore there was concern, obviously, that was be putting the reputation at risk, because it was conflicting with the charity's ethics and values. Now, a large sum of money was at stake here, so this was escalated. This was identified as an important trade-off, but it was also identified as something that had to go up to the board. It had to be the board's decision to turn down that sort of level of income on the basis of ethics and values, but that was appropriately discussed throughout the organisation, and the decision taken that actually, in that case, ethics and values trumped the income diversification risk. So a positive example there, where there was enough communication through the organisation about what that risk appetite might be. Excuse me. But I think the concept of embracing risk is well demonstrated when you consider attitudes towards loan finance and sort of forms of social investment. And this quote that I've got on the slide here, which I really like, it comes out of the operating theatre for Dr. Atul Gawande, about making sure that when you cut somebody open and put bits into them, that whatever went into them comes back out again. But it's that discipline that's necessary that actually means you can, in that case, do more sophisticated operations. But I think it works very well in the risk management scenario, that if you've got the basics in place, if you've got that discipline in place, you can take more risks and you can be more embracing of risk. When I think about that in terms of social finance, an area where many charities, in my experience, shy away from because of the risks, you can think, well, for sure there are scenarios where loan finance is not the right option, but if a charity is considering loan finance, the key question should be not what might go wrong if we did, but how can we manage the risk to ensure its success? And so that means having in place, making sure you've got the reliable, relevant, timely financial information, that you've got the cash flow forecasts to support it, etc., sensitivity analysis on those, identification of early warning signs, all the things that you can put in place, the discipline that you can put in place that gives a board the confidence to be daring and embrace risk. And I think that's what it's all about. And in the same way that Gemma finished with some practical tips, I would just leave you with these ones. The using positive language, turning risk into a positive. It's about achieving objectives, not stopping things going wrong. Having a strategic risk register that focuses trustees' time on the big picture risks and those that might be linked to delivery of the organisational strategy. Discuss and communicate a risk appetite through the organisation. Applying all those risk tools into decision making so it's actually got a practical purpose and an application. And then Gemma talked about the assurance processes, and I couldn't agree more that the assurance processes, as opposed to reassurance, the formal processes that tell trustees how those risks are being managed in practice, are absolutely critical.
Thank you very much. That was really useful. Actually, lots of things I really like there are the positive language. That, you know, I often say that all risk is risky. It is about the things that you use either to mitigate risk or to assure yourself that you have all the information in front of you. I also love the process about giving your trustees confidence to make those kind of decisions. And I think the piece about having those conversations, flagging them, and I actually made a note when both of you were talking about this, the balance between empowering your trustees to ask challenging questions of the executive without feeling that you are being interrogated or that you are there's not undermining trust, and also ensuring that you stay in the strategic and not the operational. But I think empowering boards to have those conversations rather than, as you say, take that path of least resistance is really important. So we've had some great, thank you very much for the practical tips. I really like those.